Let's get started with our next keynote. Today we have with us Noam Krakower, Chief Risk Officer at Israel Aerospace Industries ELTA. Noam will be talking about a fascinating topic, national level cybersecurity, the next era. So I'll hand over right now to Noam. Noam, how are you?
I'm fine, sir. How are you?
Well,
Long time.
Long time no see, yeah. No,
Yeah.
Very excited about this session. We have actually we started today with ST. He delivered an amazing session talking about cyber resilience as a master key of cybersecurity. She was talking. I mean, I perfectly remember the discussion. It was again, it was very interesting. She was covering a lot of topics. One of them was about collaboration. Okay, collaboration at the national level, but also at the international level, in order to address this epidemic that is basically cybercrime. I mean, we have COVID on one side, but also we have an epidemic on the digital world, and sometimes they might be correlated. Also, they might be feeding each other. So right now, I mean, we are going to be covering national level cybersecurity. So please, sir, you know the process.
Just a question, Jose. Is this the same audience that ST spoke with, or this is totally?
No, it's a different audience. When ST spoke, it was mainly, EMEA and APAC attendees. Right now, it's mainly North American Latin. If not all. If not all.
I see. I understand it. Can you see my screen?
I can see it perfectly.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, technology works. Who could believe it, Okay, can I start?
Please, get started. I am going to...
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Again, it's a real pleasure to be here. Actually, it's my third time in 2 days. And I'm really, really honored and really, really thankful, sir, for the opportunity. A little about myself before I start. My name is Noam. I'm the CRO, Chief Revenue Officer of the Cyber Division in IAI-ELTA. IAI is one of the biggest, actually, it's, in my opinion, the biggest defense industry in Israel. We produce everything from radar to missiles to airplanes, you name it. And we have our own division, our own cyber division. I'm going to elaborate about it in a minute. I'm dealing now with cyber for a bit more than 20 years, actually. I worked for the Israeli government for 30 years. And my last position over there was I was the head of one of the divisions in the INCB, Israel National Cyber Directorate, the entity in Israel that is responsible for the cyber domain. I'm going to explain it because I think it's relevant. So I'm going to explain it in a few minutes. And I served with them for 5 years, and I joined ELTA 4 years ago. And right now I'm responsible for marketing, sales, strategy for our clients, strategy for our own division. A little about our division. Our division was established almost 8 years ago. We have our own IP, our own systems. I want to mention some of them, although this is not a marketing lecture, so I'm not going to focus on that. I'll just use it as an example. But it's not only our own IP. Most of our projects are national level projects. And we are leading few Israeli consortium, cyber consortium. One of them, over here, you can see it, is dealing with national, let's call it, a national level project, cyber project. So actually, we are leading a group of only Israeli companies, some of them huge companies like ourselves or like Checkpoint or Mellanox or other companies, and some of them are, let's call it, startups. So we can combine it. This is very, very relevant for what I'm going to speak today, because we can combine between huge companies with great capabilities of integration and R&D in one hand. On the other hand, we have startups with innovation, with cutting-edge technology, and we combine it together. And it's very, very interesting, a very unique Israeli model. Actually, it was so successful that we established two other consortiums. One of them is dealing with aviation. Another one is dealing with transportation. I mentioned it and elaborate about it yesterday. I think it was very interesting. So this is the way we approach the challenge that I'm going to focus on it in a minute. Now, we work worldwide, including in Central and in South America. Of course, I'm not mentioning here all of our customers because of obvious reasons. But you can see that we are working worldwide in tier 3, tier 2, and in even, we are very proud of it, tier 1 countries that chose us as their cyber suppliers. So this is us. Now, I want to say something before I start. I'm in Israel, of course, and in the world we can find definitely a lot of companies, cyber vendors, whatever, and some of them are great. The Israelis, some of my competitors, I have to admit, are great. But we as Israelis, we have I think an advantage. We have a lot of lessons learned, a lot of experience, and we are willing to share it. In here, for example, you can see some of the, let's call it business lines or the type of projects that we are involved in or we are leading. And for example, how to build a national level project, how to defend a critical infrastructure like trains and others, how to defend different sectors and so on and so forth. And we have a lot of lessons learned, and we're willing to share it. And I think this is one of the characteristics of the Israeli industry. And it's very interesting, and we're very proud of it. Now, based on our, let's call it, international experience, we learned a very unique, very important thing. And this is a key, let's call it a key slogan, a key title, that if I need you to remember one thing from my lecture here, okay, two things. One is that IAI is the best, maybe, I'm not sure of it. But the second is that strategic challenges require strategic solutions. And I'm sure that you are all experts, and we are all familiar with how dynamic is this domain and how dangerous are the adversaries or the bad guys. And I have to admit, sometimes I'm making friends or customers, let's call them, and they tell me, and they are telling me, "Hey, we just bought a wonderful box." And in my opinion, it's not good enough, because these let's call it wonderful, magical, expensive boxes are not good enough. Look, I'm a vendor. I like to sell these boxes. But we think that the challenges in the cyber are strategic, and therefore we need strategic solutions that combine together technology, methodology, strategy, constant innovation, cooperation, that I understand that ST mentioned today, and other stuff. So we need something else, an end-to-end solution. And because, when I started to work for the INCB, we were afraid of hacktivists, and today it sounds very almost funny, almost ridiculous. How come? But we evolved, but not only us, also them. They also involved, and they gain a new technologies, and they are much more dynamic than us. So we think that we need a different solution. I have to admit, this week I participate in a few sessions in this under this title, and also in one of conferences in Tel Aviv. And some of the participants over there said, "Hey, we have to limit the capabilities of the customers or the manpower because the human resource is the manpower." Now, there is a real challenge or a real tension when we are speaking about cybersecurity. We need to balance, to find this magical point between cybersecurity and business, or sometimes operational continuity. People tend to limit the usage or the capabilities of the people in their systems, in their organizations, but then they limit also their business and operational continuity. And this is a real challenge, and we have to remember it. We have to remember it. Now, I'm sure that Esti, well, those of you who maybe heard her today, Esti is my boss, presented this slide. This is actually my slide, but we can see the major trends in the strategic trends, at least, in the cyber domain these days. And just to understand, you can see here cybercrime that Jose just mentioned, or the level of threat. For example, as I mentioned, 9 years ago, we spoke about hacktivists. Today, we are speaking about state and superpower, even superpower level threat. And this is a really interesting thing. Or, for example, the cybercrime. We can find it. You know, the Melissa Hathaway, she's an American lady, magnificent lady, of course. She was the coordinator for the White House, I think for President Obama. She estimates the damage of cybercrime between 2 to 4% of the GDP. So this is a real problem. And some of these trends or problems are strategic. For example, the weaponization of the cyber domain, or the lack of attribution. We are familiar with it, I'm sure of it. Or what is happening with the supply chain attack, or SolarWinds is just an example. And we live through it. And I'm sure that you're familiar with it. And of course, in the last, right now, it's almost 2 years now, this COVID age, we call the title of this presentation is The New Era. This is COVID era. And COVID changed all the way we live, the way we use our computers, our systems, the way we work from home, at least some of us. And the bad guys are aware of it, and they're using it. They're using it for their own advantages. And this creates huge problems, and we can see it. And yesterday we spoke I spoke in a panel with magnificent guys from Alstom and other companies. And I said there are no, let's call it sacred targets anymore. People are attacking our hospitals. Come on, it's unbelievable. Now, usually, as I said, I'm a marketing guy. I stopped in this point. I'm starting to speak about our solutions, my end-to-end solution and other solutions and other stuff. Well, this is very nice, but I'm not going to do it, not only because this is not a marketing presentation, but because something is not working. And I have to admit, 6 months ago, I stood on a stage, I think it was in Dubai, and spoke in a conference. And suddenly I felt it was a strange feeling, because the same people, me and others, stood on the same stage and spoke about the same presentations and said the same things. And actually, it doesn't work. It really doesn't work. When I started to check the main, let's call it cyber events of the last few years, how to say it, the problem was never with the scene. The problem is totally different. I'm sure that at least some of you are operating in a SOC, a SIEM SOC. Most of the SOCs are SIEM SOCs these days. And people are investing in huge, I don't know, Curator, Splunk, whatever, you name it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really work. I remember the day I saw fileless attacks for the first time. It was quite a few years ago, and today we can find it everywhere. I remember the day that I heard about SolarWinds. Now, SIEM can work with it, or most of the SIEM fail to deal with it. Or what happened with different PETIA, non-PETIA, and other stuff that started to attack us. Something is changing, something is wrong. And I feel, and I have to share it with you, that our old strategies are not relevant anymore. The old cybersecurity tools, but it's way more than the tools. It's the strategy, it's the approach, it's the understanding. At least some of it, of course, relevant. And I'm not saying, hey, you get rid of your Curator. Of course, I like Curator a lot. I prefer Splunk, but it doesn't really matter. But I have to share with you my feeling that I feel like we are using brick walls or walls against gunpowder. It can't work. It can't work. We are not dynamic enough. We need to adopt a different approach, because otherwise we're going to fail. And people are failing. 2 days ago, I sat on participate in a panel, and somebody used the good old slogan, it's not a question, are we going to get attacked? The question is, when we going to get attacked? And it's also, I'm not sure, so relevant, because we know we're going to get an attack, and we know that it's going to take us a lot of time to discover it. So what people usually do, they start to invest in those magic boxes that 10 minutes ago I said that they are not relevant anymore, or not relevant enough. And the whole idea is to adopt a different approach. Now, the magic word that we are all using in the last few years is resilience. And here you can see, for example, how we advanced, how we moved from nothing through hardening the targets to cyber resilience of the computer, of the system, of the organization, of the ecosystem. But let's admit it, we are living in the age of cyber, and the age of cyber is sometimes the buzzword age. And how we can approach it? There are a lot of, let's call it manuals, a lot of doctrine, white papers, whatever. But how really we can do it? And there are different building blocks. In here, you can see some of the building blocks that we are using according to the Oxford maturity model, according to the EU doctrine and other stuff. We need an ecosystem perspective. We need to invest in the human resource, and you can read it by yourself. But again, I'm not sure it's enough. I'm not sure it's enough, because those are just titles. So let me, if I may, of course, with your permission, I would like to present our perspective in IAI and actually in Israel. And I'll show you some of the Israeli figures in a few minutes. The first thing is the cyber ecosystem, as it was mentioned in the last slide. And in here you can see our approach. When I'm saying our approach, first of all, it happens these days, in the last few years, in Israel. Second, I can tell you that we as IAI, we are offering it to our customers, and we have a lot of experience in establishing such ecosystems. And I'm not saying it because I want you to buy it. I'll be happy, of course, but I'm trying to say, hey, we have an experience. We face some difficulties. If you remember, I said I'm willing to share our lesson learned. This is one of them. You know, a lot of the people are speaking about, where is it here? The operational capabilities of the government. Well, this is great. This is great, but it's not enough. It's not enough. And I can show you a lot of countries, including in your region, that invested a lot of money in cyber defense capabilities. I'm sure that you already noticed that I'm not using the term cybersecurity. I prefer cyber defense, but it doesn't really matter right now. But this is definitely not enough, because we need to build the ecosystem that involves not only the government and the operational unit, but also the industry that should gain some money, and the human resource, for example, to establish academies. And in here, for example, I mentioned Israel. In here, you can see the Israeli magic. What happened in Israel since 2011? It's more than 10 years, and I have the correct numbers, but I was part of this magical journey till 2018, so I'm using my own numbers. And you can see how Israel jumped the number of researchers, the amount of money investment, and other stuff you can see here. And the key number is the total companies. We moved from 200 for more than 500. Now, we did it by using defensive capabilities, establishing them, building them, but this is only part of the explanation, because the other one was that we established an ecosystem. And you can say, okay, you are Israeli, you believe it. The World Bank is saying it. And just for example, advanced countries like Australia are adopting the same method. You can see here the numbers, and investing in the human resource, investing in the local industry, investing in export, because defense is only one part, one pillar, very important one. But in order to gain the resilience level that we just mentioned a few minutes ago, you and us, we need to build an ecosystem. Or, for example, the concept of operation. What you can see here is the Israeli strategy. Now, usually when we are speaking about cyber strategy, we can find a very thick books that people wrote with the help of the World Bank or our organization, the ITU, for example. Now, let's admit it, most of them are based on cut and paste, and most of them are not relevant. And just for example, this is the Israeli model that you can see is very, very simple. Only 3 layers. One is the first one, robustness. You can replace between robustness and resilience. Like hygiene, we can teach people to clean their hands, so we can teach them, or let's call it, use the magic word, awareness. Awareness is not bulletproof, is not the old story, but it's a major building block. But it's definitely not enough. We need also, I teach my kids to wash their hands, but they're getting sick here and then. So we are going to the doctor. An example for a hospital in the cyber domain is, of course, a CERT. A CERT, most of the CERTs should be like hospitals. Ask yourself, is your CERT or is your SOC really a hospital? Well, I'll let you answer it by yourself. But for example, we are approaching or meeting a lot of customers and they are presenting their CERT. Most of the CERT today are based on the 2012 model, the ITU model. They are not relevant anymore, but without a but. If somebody wants to improve their cyber resilience level, they need to build this layer. And of course, this is COVID time. Sometimes there is, let's call it a disease like the COVID, also in the cyber. The hospital is not enough. We need to use, let's call it, government capabilities like preemptive attacks, like law enforcement and other stuff. And this is the third layer. And this is just an example, but this is an example for the need in change in the way governments and civilians and public sectors and so on and so forth, and private sectors are cooperating between themselves and defending the cyber ecosystem. Or another thing, just to see it, and I like this diagram very much, this drawing very much. This is cyber. We are all familiar with the attack, and we know that there is somewhere the attacker. But the picture is much more complicated, and we need to understand in order to gain this resilience level, and I'll show you how we can do it in a few minutes. We need to deal with these 2 levels above the ground. Let's deal with the attack. For example, this is, according to our doctrine, part of the responsibility of the government, and the CERT, of course, and also to deal with the attacker. And here I'm not speaking about active defense, but I'm speaking about proactive defense. I'll show you a system in a minute. And of course, the heart of this model of the new era of cybersecurity or cyber defense, as I prefer, is information sharing, is cooperation between the stakeholders. Otherwise, we're going to fail. And let's admit it. And again, check yourself. What kind of capabilities you have in your own SOC or CERT? I'm sure that people are speaking about awareness, but what about recovery? What about response? What about different level, next generation capabilities of mitigation? What about protection? I'm sure yesterday somebody asked me about ransomware. Today, I know that for advanced customers, at least, I need to sell, let's call it, systems that can deal with the unknown. We all know how to deal with, or at least we should know how to deal with the known threats, but what about with the unknown? And we have some solutions for it. I'm not going to elaborate. If someone finds it interesting, please approach me afterward and send me an email directly or through Jose, and I'll be more than happy to try to help you. In order to gain this new next generation, next era of cybersecurity, this new level of resilience, we understood based on our international experience that we need to adopt a different approach, a different kind, for example, of systems. And if you remember, I showed you the old picture where this blue offering, but this is not good enough because we understood that we need to offer different kinds of systems. For example, proactive system. The whole idea of sitting, I'm sorry, on our butts and waiting for something to happen, and then to hope that the SIM will identify it and that someone in the stock will know how to read these SIM logs and SIM events and SIM alerts. Well, it's very nice, but again, I'm not sure it works, or based on our experience, usually it doesn't work. So we developed a new kind of systems. Now, again, this is not marketing, but with your permission, I just want to show you some examples. Just an examples. I'm sure that at least some of my competitors have their own system, wonderful systems. For example, a system that helped the decision makers to manage the country, to manage this resilience, the cyber resilience level of the country. We call it CyberTech, or others call it CyberManage. It doesn't really matter. And just to understand it, there is a SIM inside it, but it's not all about the SIM. It's a different story, because we need someone to be accountable, and this is a major issue. And one of the explanations for the Israeli magic is that the Israeli government defined someone, Professor Matania back then, and today Mr. Yigal Luna, as the accountable guy. Someone who is accountable in day-to-day and in emergency to manage the resilience level of the country. And it's way more. For example, in this picture, you can see the screen of the system. It doesn't really matter, but we all speaking about cyber threats. But what is cyber threat? Actually, it has two dimensions. It's we combine two major things, two different things: the risk and the threat. And in this picture, and just a picture of the system behind it, you can see how we see it. For example, this event doesn't really matter. It's not in the polygon. There is no risk and there is no threat. So it's not interesting. I don't find it as an interesting issue. I'll let the organization or the sector to take care of it, because my responsibility is to manage, to have a situational awareness, cyber situational awareness in the national level. And some of the countries just don't understand it. Or in the organizational level, they try to do everything and then they are failing. And then the old walls that I mentioned a few minutes ago are just collapsing. They are not relevant anymore. Or for example, people say, okay, so we are dealing with the national level. I'm coming to one of our customers. I can see a SOC and a CERT combined together. And then I ask them, hey, but what is happening in the, finance sector, insurance sector, energy sector? And say, we don't have a clue. They don't report us. They don't cooperate with us. So in here, you can see the same strategy combined together for one of the sectors. This is the financial sector. It doesn't really matter right now. Or for the strategic processes. There are strategic processes. And I'm meeting with customers and ask them, what is the risk level for your strategic process? I don't know, your power grid, your power manufacturing. And they say, we don't have a clue. And this is an example of a change that we need to understand, that we need to improve, we need to manage our activities. Otherwise, the bad guys, and we can find them everywhere, the Lazarus Group, the Fin7, Black Shadow, just name them, and they're all over. Sometimes people tell me, hey, you are the Israelis, or you are meeting Russians and Iranians and Hezbollah. Yeah, I'm meeting them. But let's admit it, this is cyber. Okay? This is a borderless domain. You can find these threats everywhere. And people say, hey, we have time. Well, it's up to you to believe it or not, but I claim that you don't have any time. Most of the countries in the world are exposed, totally exposed to cybercrime. Most of them are exposed to espionage. Some of it, superpower espionage. I'm not going to mention the name of the superpower, but at least some of us like them very much. Others resent them. It doesn't really matter, but we are exposed and we need to change our strategy. Or I mentioned the proactive system. in here, you can see what we call size scan. We are familiar with scanners, but usually the scanners work for once. You hire a service, they give you a very nice list of IPs and vulnerabilities. But this system, just as an example, is scanning like a radar 24/7. So you can know in advance that you have a problem. And the whole idea here is to prevent the problem. Because people tend to just sit on their butt, sorry again, and to wait for something bad to happen. And then when they react, it's way too late. We are all familiar. If you remember, I mentioned the question is not when, but not if, but when. Well, usually according to FireEye, it takes us more than 3 months, sometimes 8 months, to discover and to understand that something bad just happened. Or for example, the predictive. People will say, well, I'm meeting customers and they'll say, hey, we have a wonderful intelligence. I said, yes, what kind of intelligence? Tell me, we have great feeds. Well, feeds is very nice, but just explain you what just happened. And it's very difficult to work with them. In here, this is just a screen. Again, I'm not going to elaborate about it, but the whole idea is to supply early warning in the cyber. Let me share it with you. It took us more than a year to reach a point that we can do it in an official way or professional way or reliable way. It's a better term. So this is just an example on the way we need to change the fact that we need to change the way we think in order to gain this cyber resilience level that we need. I know that my boss, Miss Esti, spoke today about information sharing. Well, now let me tell you something. In 2015, we produced the Israeli information sharing system. We called it CyberNet. It's a wonderful system, but it was relevant only to 2015. Till then, since then, we can find a lot of information sharing system, different kind of system, different kind of protocols. Just as an example, most of them are still centralized. And it doesn't really solve the problem. And for example, today we are implementing a different kind of system, a distributed one, that people can share information without discovering themselves. Because we understood that no matter what we just did or what we did, people tend not to cooperate with such systems. They don't want to share their secrets with others. So we had to change the paradigm. And again, sometimes I'm meeting customers or representatives from different organizations and come to me and say, hey, we need, I don't know, Everbridge. Wow, wonderful system, really wonderful system. Or ThreatFind. And I said, okay, I'm willing to provide it to you or to bring this company to the table, but are you sure this is good enough? This is what you just need. We are speaking about a next generation system in order to gain the next generation cyber defense in this new era. Otherwise, we are not relevant. And yesterday I mentioned this slide. I used this slide, this idea of innovation. And this is actually a focal point between the ecosystem and the defensive capabilities. Today, I know how to identify serious players. Serious players come to me and say, hey, you have wonderful boxes. I'm willing to buy some of them at least, but I want to be independent. I want to be able to develop my own systems. And for example, today, we found ourselves providing, let's call it these test beds, these capabilities. Sometimes I'm also providing the manpower, at least 50% of it, to help the customer to become independent, to build his own, let's call it innovation infrastructure. And with these systems, with this, again, infrastructure, we allow ourselves and different clients, different customers, to become independent in order to mitigate with, let's call it, critical and strategic problem, how to prevent the next SolarWind. The guys who did or behind SolarWind are familiar at least with some of them. I'll be more than happy to elaborate about it. These guys are already not only working on the next stage or the next level, they're already using the next level or the next generation system. And we need to prevent it. We need to deal with it. Otherwise, we will lose any capability. We will be vulnerable again. Or to defend critical infrastructure. And again, in the existing approach, people tell me, okay, we take care of our GSOC, governmental SOC, and our power plants. And I said, we asked them, hey, but what doctrine are you using in order to identify your critical infrastructure? And they don't know how to answer this question. And we need to help them. There are actually three main tests to identify human lives, financial damage, and critical operational continuity. It doesn't really matter now. But check yourself. Are all of your critical infrastructure are identified? Are all of them are protected? And not only from the national level. What about your organization? You know, people tell me, we just moved our critical assets to the cloud. Well, very nice, but the cloud is just in our computer. And yes, the Azure and Google and all of the Oracle and most of our partners are well defended. But are they defended good enough in order to protect your assets? What kind of tools are you using? I can tell you, I have some customers, they claim they are tier one, they're very proud of it. And the minute we ask them about their segmentation, the segmentation that they're using in their cloud, they start to mumble something or whatever, and they didn't know how to answer it. This is definitely not the needed resilience level. One of the major things is the human resource. The human resource. This is another focal point between the ecosystem and the defensive capabilities. How to train people, how to prepare them to the inevitable attack. But it's way more than that. Let me tell you something. Cyber experts, you should know it, can earn more than $100,000 a year, at least at the state. And there is a gap of around 500,000 cyber experts today in the world. In my opinion, way more. And the whole idea here is to use cyber in order to move the needle, the GDP needle, as we call it. And this is a critical issue. We are coming to our customers and tell them, hey, you need to train your manpower. You need a cyber cadet course. You need to educate your decision makers, and you need to educate your people, the manpower. One of the main secrets of the Israeli ecosystem is that we learned through the years how to train our manpower, the human resource, how to use cyber in order to help minorities and disadvantaged groups, how to implement cyber education inside the education system, how to use the capabilities of the security services in order to help all of the to push forward all of the national level or organizational level cyber resilience, how to build and advance programs. And the whole idea here is to push forward the ecosystem. And this is, we have, of course, our technology, it doesn't really matter. In order to conclude my presentation, also to leave you some time in order, in case you want to ask any questions. So in conclude, we strongly believe that this new era in national level cyber resilience require an ecosystem solution. A new approach is needed. This is cyber. There are lots of opportunities on one hand, but we can't forget for a moment that there are also a lot of challenges. And unless we're going to take care of these challenges, we will not have any chance to use these opportunities. We're just going to be vulnerable. And a key issue is that we need in a collaborative approach and advanced capabilities. In some of our customers, we are coming and we can see that people are not cooperating with each other. They are not sharing information They are not cooperating between themselves. You can see it in different governments. You can't advance like this. You can't advance because the bad guys just need to find one weak link in the chain. And they are doing it. They are great in doing it. It's not only the operational capabilities, it's also the capacity buildup and the resilience buildup. And those are major things. And another thing, we can see that a lot of the customers, a lot of the people believe that they can rely on tailor-made solutions. Well, some of the systems can work in tailor-made, sorry, not the tailor-made, in a general mode. No, general mode is not good enough. You need to move to tailor-made solutions. Otherwise, it's not efficient enough. And the new era in national level cyber resilience is definitely dependent on a change in the strategic approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Noam. Great presentation.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate you taking the time to walk us through this interesting concept of national level cybersecurity. So we have a couple of comments from the audience. One of our attendees say, will it be fair to define your solution for national level cybersecurity as a way to improve the cybersecurity posture of the whole nation, including the government itself, the economy, and the critical services? So in the same way that there are cyber posture solutions for companies, for infrastructures, this is basically like this applies the same concept, but for the whole country, right? For the nation. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that I see that Peter asked me this question. I think this is a great question, and I think that he understood, that he caught the idea of our strategy. It's not good enough. I'll share it with you. We participated in a POC in another country, a tier 1 country, how to defend an ISP. We strongly believe in let's call it a clean water model. That the government should supply, or the sector should supply, a clean internet. And they told us, hey, we don't believe in some of the organization. We don't believe in it. We know how to protect ourselves. The minute we started we operated, turn on our system, we suddenly saw two main things. First of all, the communication entering the country, but this is okay. People are trying to attack the different organizations. But the minute afterwards, we saw the transmission getting out of the organization. So those attacks were successful. In order to protect this country or the organization, we need to protect everything. Now, it's almost impossible. It takes time. You need to invest money. And but in my opinion, based on my experience as a part of the industry and as a part of the government has a lot of responsibilities in the cyber field. In one hand, on the including the posture. Posture is a very fancy word, but I prefer to use the term the cyber hygiene of the country. Let's start with hygiene, and the posture will at the end. But it's not enough, because also the organizations, the sectors, some of them have the money. Some of them don't have the money. Yesterday we spoke about health people. They don't have the money. I expect the government to invest in them. But the finance, the banking, some of our clients, we can see Fin7, the Russian guys are messing with them all the time. Hey guys, it's better that you start protect yourself. Don't expect the government to come and rescue. It's your own responsibility. And you have the tools for it. Come on, do it. They're using, I don't know, Black Carbon, one of the best systems in the world. Come on, use it. So yes, we need to improve the posture of all of the country and of the different organizations. And people should collaborate between themselves, the organization, the country, the stakeholders. And I like this term, stakeholders.
Okay, wonderful. Who can join SciShare, and what are the engagement rules for this collaboration? So are we talking about governments? Are we talking about companies? Are we talking about, who can join SciShare? Because at the end of the day, the consortium or that organization or that hub, if you will, in order to join it, you're gonna need to deliver value also to SciShare, right? You understand me?
Yeah,
So
I
how does
totally
that work?
Again, a wonderful question. When we started to build CyberNet, the whole idea was a centralized system that provided services to a specific ecosystem, like Israel. There's this CERT in the middle and different customers. Today, we have, I think, 1,400 major players. And most of them didn't or still don't give any real information inside the system. And while I was part of the INCD, my instruction to my guys was, hey guys, we need to push forward important messages or relevant information on a daily basis, because we wanted back then people to use this system. Now, SciShare is much more advanced. It's a distributed system, so there is not necessarily a cert in the middle. It's up to the customer to decide. So people can share between them according to different models. For example, the model you just mentioned, sir, is the Cyber Threat Alliance, American Cyber Threat Alliance by Michael Daniel, and we are part of it, of course. So people are sharing information. After a while, we understood that let's call it national level collaboration or cooperation is a wonderful thing, but it's not good enough. And today, for example, we are offering our customers the different certs that we provided. We're going to speak with each other and share information between them. Now, think about it. First of all, it's much more efficient. You can save money, because if someone has a signal system in, that he uses, and another one uses X-Force capabilities, think about it together. We elaborate, we push the system way forward. So you can use the different systems. Now, in the next, even the relevant, this version of the system right now that is operational, you can connect it to different and other information sharing systems. So the whole idea here is to build an information, a national level and international level cooperation. Now, these systems are not built, we didn't build them to the, let's call it the households. It's not relevant to households. It's relevant for organization, major organization, or even sectors. Of course, you can get connected to one of these organizations, sector CERT, for example, and other stuff.
Okay, wonderful. So we don't have more time. We are gonna jump into another fascinating session. So I would like to do two things. First of all, I would like to thank Noam for this wonderful presentation, and I would like to encourage our audience to get in touch with Noam. Okay, you can do that directly. You can do that through us. Well, one of the guys just say nice info, but you know, feel free to do it. And if you don't know his contact details, you can come to us, and we will be more than happy to put you guys in touch. So thank you, sir. I appreciate it. It has been a long day. It's been a long day. So are you based in the US right now, or are you based in Israel? You are in Tel Aviv right now, right?
I'm in Tel Aviv, yeah. In Israel now, it's 11 p.m. It's 11 p.m.
Yeah, it's 11 p.m. So thank you very much for taking the time, for doing the effort, you know, to be with us. We really appreciate that. Thank you.
Guys, thank you very much. Thank you for the honor, and thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day, a wonderful conference. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.